Cool. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rachna, and I'm part of the community team at leap.club. I will be your host for the next 60 minutes. Today, we have amongst us Arvinder Gujral. He has over 22 years of experience in the internet, telecom, media, and tech consulting industry. As the first employee of Twitter India, which in itself is a huge thing, he set operations across the country and then later went on to lead the Southeast region as managing director. He currently works at Wati as the global head of customers. Thank you so much for joining us, Arvinder, today. I hope you're looking forward to this as much as we are. Before we kickstart, we're going to engage you in a quick game, just so our members get to know you a little better. So I'm going to throw in a bunch of words at you, and you have to just respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. So are you ready? Cool. Let's go. Remote teams.
Asking me, yeah?
Yeah, you're up.
Remote teams. Is the video on? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh, that's exactly the question everybody asks on every call.
Very good one. Okay, cool. Elon Musk.
Oh my God, madcap genius.
Okay, your favorite sport?
Cricket.
What you're currently reading?
Currently I'm reading a historical fiction. Hold on, my Google is talking to me now. Hey Google. Thank you. Yeah.
Historical fiction?
Yeah, it's by an author called Abir Mukherjee. He lives in Scotland. Hey Google, please switch off. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So yeah, it's a historical novel by Abir Mukherjee, A-B-I-R Mukherjee. He's got a series of novels set in 1919 India. And it's a British inspector who comes to India and in Calcutta, and then they have happening. So it's a fascinating series.
Last one, the edit option on Twitter.
Please give it.
Okay, thanks for your answers, Arvinder. Those are pretty candid. All right, we officially begin now. Today's session will start with Arvinder setting context and talking a little bit about driving high performance teams. We'll then move into a question answer session. So start pouring your questions into the chat box. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we've already sent the most asked questions to Arvinder prior to the session, but we will be mixing those up with unanswered questions in the chat box as we go along today. We're really looking forward to this session. I think it's an extremely pertinent question, especially considering how much work has changed post-pandemic, and we're all kind of still figuring that out. Enough of me now, Arvinder, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Rachna. And good to see some of you on the side, but I'm not scrolling because I'm just going to concentrate now on actually speaking. So let me give you a quick context, right? So I want to, talking about leadership, change, and all of that, it's very amorphous. And I like very practical things, something that you can feel and touch and connect with, rather than giving HBR review article gyan on a call. I am a very hands-on operator. I am not a consultant, just to clarify. And hence everything I come across will be more experiential than, thinking in just abstract terms. So I want to talk about leadership and managing teams, be it in a large corporate or be in a startup, through my own example of what I just went through when I was with Twitter. So it's my own case study, right? So give you a good background. So I have over 22 years experience. I spent 8 years at Twitter, which is the longest stint I've ever done in a single organization. I joined them when it was a true startup. It was pre-IPO. I was the first employee in India, one of the first handful of you in Asia. And that in itself is a long story and an actually fascinating one of how I ended up joining Twitter. But I spent the first 4 years running partnerships and biz dev for Twitter for Asia Pacific. And I chose to be based out of India. And that is why they opened an office in India. I had the option at that point of time to move to Singapore because they had only a Singapore office. They didn't have an India operation. So I did that for 4 years. And after 4 years I decided to move to Singapore, primarily to escape the pollution of Gurgaon, where I was based. And both my children were falling sick nonstop. So I decided this is not happening for me. And before this, I had lived in the Bay Area for a few years as well in California. So I decided to move to Singapore. And this is where the case study actually begins. So, you're now in Twitter for 4 years, you know the landscape, you know the digital marketing landscape, you know where Twitter falls in the larger ecosystem. Just to say, for me, the most important word that I feel, be it as when you're joining a business or when you're leading a team or when you're having a conversation, it is the word context. Without context, everything else can be misunderstood. And that is why I'm giving you a bit of a backstory. So you get the context in which everything is happening. So just to give you context, in a global advertising business, if you look at the scale, Google makes over 220, $240 billion a year in ad revenue. Next big daddy is Facebook, which is making about 150 to 180 billion dollars in revenue. Twitter, just to give you context, last year was making below 4 billion a year in revenue. This year they might do 5. I'm not numbers, but you get the scale, right? And Twitter is a really small company and a very, very small platform when it comes to real size of an organization and the revenue that it drives. But obviously, it has an outsized influence on social, on society as a platform. So don't confuse that with the size of the organization and the size of the company that you're working in, right? So when I moved to Singapore and I would say, Arvi, we're looking for an MD for Southeast Asia. Are you interested? And because I had done one role for 4 years for a change, I said, absolutely. Now I moved to Singapore 29th of July 2017. I took this role in the 1st of September. I sat down with the person who had sales finance for Asia Pacific, and I said, okay, Dennis, give me the state of the union of the Southeast Asia business for Twitter. He said, I think you will need a beer to sit down with this. And at Twitter, you can have alcohol. It's available in the fridge all the time. So actually, we went and got a couple of beers and we sat down. He said, well, we have about 20, I forget the exact numbers, some 20 odd sales revenue regions in the world. Your region is last in ranking. So it's the smallest revenue region. Twitter grew by a very small percentage, a small incremental single-digit percentage globally. Your region was declining negative 50% year on year for the last few quarters. So you're the smallest region and the fastest negative region in the world. 50% of your team has either resigned or has put in the papers or are threatening to resign. So welcome to being the MD for Southeast Asia. I said, what the hell did I was pretty happy doing BD for 4 years. I should have continued that easy job than doing such a hardcore job where it is very easy to scale and actually measure success or failure. So I said, okay, anyways, I laughed at him. He said, why are you laughing? I said, well, I can't screw it up any more than it's already been screwed up. So I only see a positive that we can only go up from here. So that's where we were in September 2017. Now, this is where I want to take this as, how did we turn around this business? So we actually, the reason it's a case study because it's successful. And so I made it a case study. If we had continued declining, I would not have been sitting here and talking about it. But so the first thing when I met the team, and a lot of the people in that room who were sitting with me at that point of time had already decided to leave or were putting in papers or in their mind were thinking, I want to leave this place. Because what is happening was because you're the fastest negative growth region in the world, no cross-functional team wanted to work with you, right? Because they don't want to get their hands dirty, because they want to back a winning horse. So they'll back with China, they'll go and work with India, they'll work with Australia. These are the other 3 regions in Asia Pacific, rather than work with Southeast Asia, because then they look bad. They don't meet their numbers, right? So the first thing I told my team is I sat down, I said, okay, let's have a hard call. Do we want to be successful or do we want to continue this? Obviously the answer is very self-explanatory. Everybody wants to be successful. I said, well, half of you are thinking of leaving. So you have 2 options in front of you. I'm giving you 2 options. You can leave right now. You can resign and leave, right? But just think this through. Suppose you want to leave Twitter at this point of time and you don't want to leave SEA at this point of time. You go to another company for an interview. They'll ask you, so tell me your performance in the last 4 quarters, because you're all salespeople. What would you tell them? You missed your 4 quarters, because obviously all of you have missed your numbers, hence the whole team is degrowing at negative 50%, right? Will you get your dream job at that pay in which you're wanting? Everybody said, no, we probably won't get that job. I said, the other option is you stick with me for another 4 quarters. We turn this around. We have a positive story. Each of you have a positive story. Then leave this team. Then go to a Facebook or a Google and interview there. And when they ask you, give me your last 4 quarters, what are your revenue achievements, you can actually show positive numbers. You will probably get your dream job. And then people stop leaving. It's like, you know what, if I leave now, I'm going to go for a substandard job for a substandard pay at the bottom of the cycle rather than go in at a high, so I can command a premium in the market and get the kind of job I really, really want. So people actually did not resign. So that's the first thing I wanted to do, was to make sure the team stays, the coalition of the team has to be very strong, because the team is not strong and they don't believe that this might be a very selfish reason for them to stay, but at least I stemmed the flow of people leaving the organization. The next thing I said, okay, for us to grow, what is the context of growth? Now, if you look at Twitter, US contributes about 60 to 65% of global revenue. SEA was one of the smallest regions in the world. So even if we, double, triple our revenue, it will still be a single 1%, 2% contribution to global revenue for Twitter, right? So I said, that is not what is important. The amount of dollars we bring is not important. The percentage growth is our currency, right? What you cannot determine how large your market is. That is determined by macro factors of the market. You can determine how fast you're growing in your market. So I said, our currency is not the dollar amount. Our currency is the percentage growth we deliver to the organization, because that is a net positive to the rest of the company. If there is some region which is a net negative, we want to be the net positive. I said, the other reason you want to grow is if we don't grow, nobody else in the cross-functional team will want to work with us. For me to go and have a conversation with the other head of departments to align them with us can only happen once they see that, this team is turning around. So before we go and ask for things, let's fix our own house in order. So we started creating a roadmap and a strategy for the next 2 quarters. Now, I know a lot of companies and a lot of teams and a lot of startups, and including the one in which I'm working now. In fact, I've been speaking to a few investors in the last few weeks as well. Everybody says, show me your 5-year roadmap, your 3-year projections. And I always laugh. In fact, I had a call with one of the top VCs in the world just last week. And they said, I want a 2025, a next 5-year revenue projection. And I actually said, I'm not going to give it to you. He said, why? I said, what's the point? Anything I tell you now, between now and the next 5 years, maybe you're not going to be in this role and I'm not going to be in this role, right? So the next person who's taking your job and the next person taking my job will be looking at these numbers and laughing like, who the hell created this fiction, right? So let's not live ourselves because somebody says there's a template of a 5-year plan. In the world in which we operate, there is just so much uncertainty and the space is so high, you cannot predict with any certainty of where you're going to be. And people say, and a lot of you are in a startup, right? Including me, speed is more important. And I keep saying, no, speed is not important. Velocity is more important. What is velocity? Speed into direction, right? You can go fast in the wrong direction and you'll be worse off than going slowly in the right direction, right? So for me, velocity is more important. And hence, when somebody says, give me your 5-year roadmap, 3-year plan, blah, 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 I said, well, I can do a plan for the next couple of quarters, which is a tactical plan, like exactly what we will execute. I can do a planning, which is macro for the next 2 quarters after that. So maybe for the next 1 year. Anything after 1 year is pure hypothetical. Those assumptions can change next week, right? So either you make a plan and then every week we sit down and revisit that plan because assumptions can change. But the way the practical things of life is, nobody goes and revisits the plan once it's made. They make it, people review it, they say, this is great, and nobody looks at those numbers again, right? Till somebody else comes and say, I want your next 5-year plan, and you make a new fiction story, right? So if you're into writing fiction, please make 5-year plans. If you're really into being an operator and an executor, please make 1-year plans, which you can execute, because you only have a 1-year foresight. Anybody who tells me they can see further than 1 year, then please play the stock market. Don't do a job in a startup, right? Because you'll make a lot more money in the stock market if you have a view of over 1 year. So the first thing I did was I set the context of growth for the team, right? Then I said, what do we stand for as an organization? What does this team stand for, right? Are we a sales team, or are we the team that kind of becomes the glue for all cross-functional teams to win SEA against the giants of Facebook and Google? I said, to give context further, I said Google's facilities department, the people who manage their office in Singapore, is larger than the entire sales team of Twitter in Southeast Asia. Now, with that context, how do you think you're going to beat a giant like that? You cannot beat that giant like that, because we are a decimal point in terms of resources to what a Google does, which means we have to be very careful about who are we going to win against. So framing of your competition is important. Is your competition Google and Facebook? I said, please don't compete against them. You're going to waste your time. Let's go compete with the other smaller players and win their market share. And that was the first thing we did, was to go after the identified smaller competition, which we could win. Why is that important? If you've seen sports and if you follow sports, winning is a habit. Every sports captain talks about it. Give your team incremental growth or milestones that they can give. It's very good to have a BHAG, right? Big hairy audacious goal, right? Who has seen the big hairy audacious goal in 3 years' time? As I said, you won't be alive that long to see that. Give them slightly out of their reach, but incremental milestones that are in your time horizons and which are achievable. Why? The minute the team achieves it,
just raise the bar a little higher. The team achieves that, raise the bar a little higher. As somebody said, right, a 0.1% incremental achievement on a daily basis compounds, the compounding interest theory, right? The same exact philosophy. Give them an incremental milestone that they can achieve. It gives the team confidence. What it does, more importantly, is all the other cross-functional partners start seeing this, what your team is doing. And they say, dude, something is happening there. This team, which was failing every Monday's revenue call, everybody had glum faces. Suddenly, every Monday, I'm seeing more wins being talked about, more clients coming in, more revenue coming in. And then suddenly you will see the tonality of the conversation of the Monday revenue weekly meeting changing. So somebody's strategy, brand strategy, hey, what can I do for this client? I want to lean in. Somebody in the finance, sales, hey, Arvi, I think we can do better in that market. So people are on their own. Instead of you going with the begging bowl and asking for help, people are coming on their own to say, hey, I want to see if I can do something with you with your team on this. This is why it is important to create winning milestones than big, hairy, audacious goals. Big, hairy, audacious goal only looks good on a management book, right? Nobody goes and wins and BHAG. Everybody wins the small iterations of the goal in between. That's what you win and celebrate. So that's the second thing we did. We got the context of growth. We set to the context of the team. And then I said, let's be clear. When you're creating a strategy for your team, and I'm a big believer in variabilities. What I mean by that, you need to create a growth equation. Suppose you are only operating in the India market, right? Again, all of you are working in various kinds of startups across different roles, some in HR, some in marketing, some in sales, but I'm just giving my own experience. If you are selling one product in one market, you have two variables, product and market, right? What you have to try and do is create more variables. You need to break that market down into smaller segments. So then you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on these 3 segments this quarter, those 3 segments the next quarter, and the following 3 segments. What it does is, if some segment does not win, the other segment you start winning, and you're balancing your book of business. You're not only centralized on one vertical or one customer base or one kind of customer. You need to have a variability of your customers. You need to have variability of products. You need to have variability of go-to-market approaches. You need to have variability of pricing. You need to have variability of partnership that you bring to the table. You need to bring more variables to your growth story. And only then can you start growing. So when I joined this team, I did not go and say, okay, let's go win Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, just like India, is a very large place, but multiple languages, multiple contexts, multiple countries. India is 25 countries in a sense, or 27 countries in one, right? So you can't just go, let's go win India. Most people come and say, I want to win India. Then the first macro, they say, no, let's go focus on West India and South India. Then I'm like, what is West and South? There's no such region on a map called West India and South India. You have to go very specific, very granular. What markets are you going to win? A market can be a city. Within the city, which sector? Within that sector, which price point? So you have to go as drill down as that, right? So depending on the function you're operating in, who are you going to focus on? And that becomes your variability at play. Once you put a growth equation at play, then you have to measure to honesty. This for me is very important. You can have simple measurable. Most of us measure like the revenue growth, team attrition, right? So when I was inside the revenue function, we used to measure how many meetings did you do. So just to when you track how many meetings each salesperson does, the theory is the more meetings you do every week, the more revenue you will bring eventually, because you're being very active. And I'm like, why do I care how many meetings you do if those meetings are all useless, right? So you have to track the input variable that gives you the output of revenue. The input variable is not number of meetings. The input variable is the efficacy of those meetings. Who are you meeting? What happened in that conversation? Did you move the deal forward by an inch? That is what you need to measure. So those who only look at superficial metrics then live on the surface, and hence you will never go down to the next iteration on exactly what moves the needle for the organization. So once we did this, so there are a few lessons that I took from the turning on. Let me tell you the outcome of this 4-year project that we did. So 2017, we were the last region in the world from a revenue perspective. We were degrowing at negative 50%. Fast forward to July 2021, when I left Twitter, we grew our business 7x in 4 years. So 700% growth. From being the last revenue region in the world, we became number 6 and number 7 in the world in revenue contribution to Twitter globally. We became the fastest growing revenue region with the highest contribution. But for me, the biggest factor of pride was I had 0 attrition in my team for the last 3 years of the 4 years I was there. Now, and the company attrition rate was 23% globally, including APAC, right? In fact, forget about negative 0 attrition. We were a net positive because I had people from different parts of Twitter globally. I had people from Twitter Dublin, Twitter Australia, Twitter India, Twitter Brazil, and Twitter US, calling me saying, do you have a place in your team? We've heard amazing things about the culture of your organization, your team, and how you're performing. We want to work for you. And so I feel like we're a small team. I don't have unlimited headcount, but you can feel to apply to the open headcount we have internally. So we became an attraction for talent around the world for Twitter, right? That tells you you're doing something right. So that was the outcome and we did obviously a lot of things from a strategy perspective to go and win the market, start winning market share against even the big guys eventually. But the 7 lessons I learned, okay? 1, you cannot predict hypergrowth. 50 to 60% of you are working in startups. Every time your boss tells you to predict your business for the next 3-4 years, tell them, I'm sorry, please look at the pitch deck that we made when we raised a seed, and you tell me if you are exactly there as per the pitch deck. None of you are following that deck and those projections. So don't ask me to project for 4 years from now or 3 years from now. Yes, let's focus on the next few quarters. I think we can work on that. So you cannot predict hypergrowth. Anybody who says they can predict hypergrowth is faffing. 2, say no to your bosses with confidence. So what I did was, every time HQ came down, Twitter became a large company over a period of time. And when you become a large company, you have all those, T's and C's you have to, track. But I still operated like we are a startup in a large organization. We're just a well-funded startup. That was my operating principle, right? And that, because see, it is not possible for you to grow 700% in a large company, because large companies don't grow 700%. They grow 10, 5, 20, 30%. That's the growth rate. Everybody around me was growing at those numbers. India, Australia, China was the only one who was growing almost at our pace. US, Brazil, UK, you take any other market, they were all growing at single digit or just small double digit numbers. We grew 700% in 4 years. That the only way you can do that is when you are the maverick in the room. When we start saying no to HQ. HQ said, do this. I said, no. They said, why? I said, because of this. I said, oh, okay. All right, go ahead. You obviously have to back it up with reasoning, and you have to back it up with credibility, because you have performed something in the last few quarters and they're seeing you're doing something, and they say, okay, let's not disturb them. Let them continue on their merry ways, right? 3, copy and paste with pride. I am not the smartest man in any room, including this one right now. But what I will do is I will take the best practices that you will do and I will copy it and deliver it. For me, the result matters, not who gets the credit for it, right? You will get the credit once you deliver. When you have 700% growth in 4 years, people will give you credit even if you are not looking for it. It will come on by itself. Don't go looking for credit before you deliver. So that's the mistake most early jobbers make in life. They're looking for credit for every small thing they do. Hey, I sent you a nice deck. You didn't say, well done. Like, dude, come on. You will make 1,000 decks in your life. If you're expecting a well done for every email you sent, you're going to be having a long wait in life. 3, don't track OKRs. As I said earlier, track actionable insights and take action on those. And don't outsource actions to somebody else in your team. Be the driver. 5, never take no for an answer. So every time I wanted a budget, people said, no, we don't have budget. I wanted headcount. No, sorry, headcount. So on Twitter, when you want headcount in your sales team, they do something like called RPH, revenue per headcount, right? Obviously, in the US, revenue per headcount per salesperson was $1 million. At SEA, because we have a low, India, SEA, we are a low cost per impression markets. Your revenue per headcount was $300,000. So every time the CFO is giving an incremental headcount, they would go to the US. So I was never getting headcount, right? I'll exclude you. When they never gave me, I started doing partnerships with the distribution partners in my region, and I got them to hire for me. So I grew my own team, the own operated team, from 9 to 20, right? So from 12 to 20 in 4 years. My partner team grew from 10 to 60. So my cost base for Twitter remained static, like just from 12 to 20. That was a cost base. Partners were not, those salaries were not being paid by me. We were paying them a commission on incremental revenue. So just being innovative about getting what you want if your company cannot support you, right? Again, thinking like a startup. If you were not thinking like a startup, you would say, oh, HQ doesn't give it to me. It's very easy to sit where you are and cry foul about no one is supporting me, no one cares for me, nobody's giving me budget, I don't have headcount, I don't have resources, my marketing budgets are so small, or look at that HR team, they have so big, I'm so small. If you cry, you're crying alone. Remember that. When you laugh, people will join you. So don't sit and make excuses about lack of resources. There are startups which are much smaller than you are and who are operating at a much better pace than you are with lesser resources. Always use that as a benchmark. That somebody who is more hungry with less resources is doing better than you than where you are today, right? So if you think of that, you will start moving your ass and getting things done rather than sitting and cribbing about what support you're not getting. When I planned, every year I would make an operating plan for the next year. I would assume there is no headquarters and I would assume there is no budget. Why? With that assumption, I would force myself and my team to think out of the box on how to get that growth with no incremental resources being allocated to me. When you do that base plan, that is your base plan. If I have no support, no incremental budget or headcount, I can grow from X to Y with the current setup. That is your base plan. And that plan also was an aggressive plan. After that, every time I got incremental budget and headcount, I supercharged my growth. So assume there is no headcount, there is no budget, and there is no headquarters to support you, and make your annual operating plans with that assumption. You will never fall short because you have already assumed the worst case scenario, right? And finally, for me, this was very important. Distribute planning horizon. What do I mean by that? In my team, there were 3 layers. I was the managing director. I had 3 sales heads. Under them were the ICs, individual contributors, who were the salespeople, right? The way I operated time horizon from decision making and planning was the following. The ICs would have to look at the current quarter and optimize for the current quarter. Okay. My team leads would optimize for the following quarter, for the next quarter. So their decision making criteria, when a client was saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, they were like, okay, it's all right. I can say no to that budget because I know this client will come to me next quarter. My operating principle, the time horizon, was the annual plan. Why is that important? What happens is, in a rush, everybody optimizes for the here and now, for today. If everybody in the team is only operating for the here and now, nobody's operating for the immediate future. And as I said, I don't believe more than 1 year out, right? So if you can distribute the planning horizon, the time horizon, decision-making criteria of the team, so then you're all keeping yourselves honest about where you want to go. So once we followed this, we grew our business 700% in 4 years. We had 0 attrition. In fact, we became a net addition of headcount from other parts of the region. And we became one of the case studies internally. In fact, I made this presentation a month before I quit Twitter to the global leadership team. And people gave a standing ovation. Like 700% growth rate is not assumed inside a large organization, right? 0 attrition in 3 years is not assumed in a large organization. We are all, because my team was selling the same exact product that the team in the US and Australia and India was selling, right? So we had no incremental advantage of pricing or product or market. In fact, most people said, Arvi, how the hell will you operate in SEA? First of all, I'm not from Southeast Asia. I don't speak the languages in this region. 2, it's a messy market. You have multi-markets, multi-region, multi-context, multi-culture. So it's not a single market where you can optimize resources. I said, for me, that's actually an advantage rather than disadvantage. If I have a single market, then I have a single variable. If I have multi-market, I have multiple variables. So I can go and optimize Thailand. Next year I go optimize Vietnam. The next year I go optimize Singapore. Then I go optimize Indonesia. So I can keep creating this, this flow of markets that are creating a momentum for me. I believe I've gone fairly on time now, or?
Yeah, we're on time.
All right. Yeah. So
any parting words?
So those were essentially, the things we did internally and how we grew. So now I'm happy to take questions, and I can connect back to this case study or share something else entirely.
Yeah. Thanks, Arvinder. That was really insightful. I loved your point about not having extremely high examples to compete with. And I started watching Formula One, so I kind of related it to how McLaren and Haas don't even think of Red Bull and Mercedes, right? Because like they don't have those cars, but like if they come forth, they're really happy because that's what they're fighting for. But we'll move to questions now. I'll start with something that I found really interesting, which was how to strike a balance between delegation and quality control. And I think especially in startups with founders being really protective and possessive about their products or their brand or whatever, sometimes delegation is, you delegate, but you're so worried about the outcome and the quality control becomes like a bottleneck. So how do you find the balance between those two?
So I saw on the question list you sent, there were a few questions based purely on startups. For me, the most important thing, and now, at a very late age of my career, I've gone back to a startup. I've done a few startups before. Today was a startup when I joined. So at a very late age, I'm back to a startup, and it's a Series A startup. It's not a well-funded, like most of you in India are probably working in very well-funded. Indian startups have crazy amount of funding. We have a very small amount of funding, but but irrespective of how well-funded you are, it's still going to be a crazy ride, right? For me, the most important thing when you're in a startup, right? Actually, forget the founders for a second, right? Why are you there? Somebody's hired you because they need somebody of your caliber and expertise and your experience in the organization, which means there is an inherent bias to give you some decision-making prowess, to give you some authority to go and execute. Because if they did not, they would not have hired you in the first place, right? They would have only hired, very junior folks who can execute, because every decision would have come just only from the founder or the founders, right? But if some of you are in management position in startups, which means the founders have acknowledged the fact that they can't execute by themselves. They do need help, right? When you are hiring, now this is where it is very important. Who you hire is extremely important, right? Now, while I'm hiring for my current startup, I actually don't want to hire somebody who works at a very large company for a very long period of time. So for instance, if you have been at Google for 20 years, I would be very scared of hiring you right now. Not because I have a bias against Google, it's just because you have been brought up in a system where everything is taken care of for you. And you operate in your little small silo where you have a lot of hand-me-downs given to you, right? So you can be amazing in that environment. But imagine you come to a startup, you have nothing, no support structure around you. And your job scope is actually larger than what it was at Google, because obviously you have lesser people, so you have to deliver a lot more value. So then what confidence do I have that this person can succeed in that dynamic, variable, crazy world of a small startup, right? And so what I look for when I hire is people who can show passion and ownership. And for me, in the conversation with them, the word I'm always trying to listen, if they can say it to me, is impact. If somebody says, I want to join a startup because you have valuation is good, I'm like, no, that's not the reason you want to work here. If somebody says, I want to join this startup because I can create impact, I want to come somewhere to create impact, this person is a self-starter. You need self-starters in a startup. You can't give dictations as a manager in a startup. If you are giving dictations right now, then you have to please look at the composition of your team. Those people should be working in a large corporate organization, not in a startup. Because I had a conversation recently with my own team in the startup, right? People were like, again, delegation, quality control of decision-making, the output, quality of output, right? All of that is then output to the input variable. Input variable was, I asked all of them, I said, almost all of you also wish at some point of time that you're your own founder and CEO of your own startup. Like most of us have this thing, yeah, one day I will do my own startup. I'll be the founder and CEO of my own startup, right? All of us, even if you don't utter it out to public, in your mind, like all of us want to write a book, all of us also want to run your own startup. And so I tell them, let me give you an opportunity. You are the CEO of your own startup today. So I just spoke to this girl in my team. She's in Colombia right now. And I said, okay, I said, Crystal, you are the CEO of your own startup. You are bringing in X amount of hundreds of $1,000s to the company. So that's your revenue. You're a startup, you're a founder. I'm giving you budget, which is my funding. I'm a seed fund. If I give you this seed fund, what value will you give? So how much will you grow that revenue? She's like, okay. Why that is different is, if that conversation was, hey, your quota last quarter was this, next quarter will be, I'm giving you a 25% hike. She'll say, oh, how can I do 25% in a quarter? That's a massive hike in quota. I can't do it. Switch it around. Hey, you did X amount of dollars last quarter. You are the CEO of a startup. Make me a pitch. How much do you think you can do the next 4 quarters? What will you pitch me? You will pitch me a hockey stick, right? You will not pitch 8% incremental growth quarter on quarter. You will say, hey, Arvi, I can do 25% next quarter, 50% the quarter. I'm going to show you a hockey stick. You see that the minute I make you the owner and founder of your own company or your own function, you operate very differently rather than me giving you a number. And that's exactly what I look for, and I talk to my teams about. So coming back to your question about how do you delegate, and quality control will happen automatically if people have the ownership of what they are delivering. If people don't have ownership, which means they have not taken your target and internalized it, then you will always be chasing the ball, saying, hey, you're behind your quota. Hey, this is not happening. Hey, that didn't work out, right? But the minute that employee has, you turn the conversation saying, what do you think you should be doing? If they come back, nobody will come back and say, I'll just do incremental work. Nobody will say that, right? So that's the conversation you should be having.
Yeah, and I think Sneha has also asked a question about keeping the motivation of the team going, which is one of the most common questions we got, especially like with remote work, in startups with pivots, like how do you limit chaos? And also Sneha's mentioned when core people quit for better opportunities. Now you have no experience with that because no one ever quit your team, but if you have some insights into just like how to keep your team motivated consistently despite like the ups and downs.
So two things here. You cannot keep people motivated 24 hours by 7. Two, there are two kinds of motivation factors. One is extrinsic, one is intrinsic. Extrinsic is you can give bonus and all of those things, promotion. Those are the extrinsic motivating factors, but those have a very short shelf life, because those are, like thrusters on the rocket ship going to space. It'll give you a momentary boost, just let you escape gravity for a bit, but then something else has to take over for the rocket ship to escape velocity of Earth and go towards the moon. That has to be the intrinsic motivator. The fact that somebody in your team has joined your startup, there has to be something that made them join it. There were many options, right? I refuse to believe that people only had, this was the only job they ever got in their life. They're like, chalo, wherever we are, we'll figure out later on. There may be some people like that as well, but that won't be the majority of your team, right? People always have optionality in life. Worst case scenario, they can quit and just sit at home for a while and figure things out. You have to tap into the person's intrinsic motivator. Some people want to work in the startup because they love the culture of the company. Some people want to work because they think this is the high performing team and they're getting their quarterly bonuses and they just care about money. Some people care about because the title that they're carrying is better than the title they got in the last job, and it really matters to them. Some people want constant pat on the back. But everybody has a different motivating factor, right? And as a leader, it is your job. It is a tough job. And I tell people, and almost everybody in my team wants to be a people manager. I said, why do you want to be a people manager? It is the most unrewarding job, because people only come to you when something has gone wrong. If things are hunky-dory, they're busy partying themselves. As a people manager, people will come to you and say, this guy said to me, it's like, I have 2 children. Your children will come to you, he said to me this, he called me that name. I'm like, come on, guys. So it's almost like having your own set of children in that sense, but adult, mature children who are looking for validation, who are looking for help, who are looking for support, who are looking for mentorship. If some of your parents, those are the exact same words you're having with your children right now, right? So there is very little difference between having your own children and managing a team. The difference being you spend more time with your team than with your own children. So that's the amount of time you spend in your company, right? And so it is very important, like you know your own children very, very well, you need to know your team very, very well individually, right? And once you know your team individually very well, you know exactly what motivates that person. Not everybody will be motivated by a raise. Not everybody will be motivated by a promotion, but some people will. So please don't go by textbook. If you go and Google right now, does money motivate people? You will find a Harvard Business Research which will show money does not motivate people. And there will be a lot of case studies, in fact, done in India and outside around the world. There are some amazing YouTube videos about how it does not motivate. I'm like, please come and meet my team at Twitter. Half the people were motivated only by money and the bonuses that they were getting, because we were killing the quota so nicely that the check sizes of the commission was so good. They're like, this is it. This is what we want to do. So money does motivate people, but it is not a long-term motivator. You must find the intrinsic value of what makes people stay in your company. And the best thing you can do is give them freedom to execute. So what happens? The worst thing you can do is in an interview say, man, Rachna, you are super smart. You have amazing ideas. And the minute I hire you, I don't let you execute anything. I tell you exactly what to do because you are a dumb idiot and I know all the things that are right and you cannot go and execute. And you're like, dude, you hired me to execute and now you're not letting me do things, right? Which is what happens in most organizations. Most bosses or managers have this higher than thou attitude. I know there's a question somewhere that came in the document about titles and age of founders, right? In fact, yesterday I had a conversation. There's a guy in my team. He runs ops for me. He's 26, 27, super bright kid. And we were going to go into a call with one of our clients who's a CEO of a large company. And I said, Louis, you should do this call. He said, Arvi, no, I need you there, man. I don't think I can do this. He's the CEO of this company. I'm just an ops guy. I'm 27 years old. I said, first of all, he doesn't know your age. He doesn't know your title. You're going to be on a hangout call with this guy. And on the topic on which we are going to have a conversation, you know 10 times more than he does. And I said, in life, titles are transitory, and experience is a number that only sits on your LinkedIn resume. In life, every time you go into a negotiation always rests on one principle: the power of arbitration. Who has the power of arbitration? It is usually information. He or she who has more arbitration of information wins that argument. I said, Louis, in this conversation on this subject, you know more than this person. Do you think he can defeat you in a conversation in this? He says, no way. He has no idea because he never touches the system that deep. People in his team will probably know. I said, exactly. So why would you go and say, oh, he's the CEO, I can't speak? I said, dude, you should have more. He should be the one saying, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know enough. So that is the kind of conversation you need to have with your team to give them the confidence to go challenge you, to make your say. Actually, and I told the team, I'm the most ignorant person in my own team because I'm not as fluent. The chief clueless officer is me. So right, that gives them the power, empowerment to go and execute things. The minute they do it, they get the power of confidence.
Radhika has put up a question on the chat box, and I think a bunch of people have asked about hiring. So Radhika, do you want to unmute yourself and ask us the question?
Hey, sure. First of all, thank you so much, guys. So I had actually two questions. One being, both of them very hiring related. One being that in startups, you have normally multiple problems to solve. You are looking for people who are not essentially just stuck to that one particular specific problem, but are willing to do more. Now, in such certain situations, and this is in both ways, I have been trying to hire and they're specialists, but in startups, you have to pick up certain roles which are more general in nature. So one would be like, how do you identify or push for generalists versus the specialist aspect? I think I'll let you take this one and then ask the next one, or if you prefer, I'll just ask that one.
The question actually comes in, what is the stage of a startup? If it's a very early stage startup, you need specialists who can be generalists. If it's a late stage startup, like you're a Series D, E, F, G, you're a pretty large organization, you have hundreds of people, you would prefer to have more specialists than generalists.
Okay.
This question actually belongs between a seed and a series, say B and C at best. Because at some point of time, you will need people who specialize in the role in which they are being hired for, right? If you're a company full of generalists, you will find it a little difficult to win because nobody will be will give you that edge of information or expertise or knowledge of the operating area in which you are in, because everybody's having a general principle operating. And it's like I can bat, bowl, field, everything. You can't have 11 people being all-rounders. So again, it's a stage in which a startup is. Yes, you will need all-rounders, more all-rounders, a higher concentration of all-rounders in the early stages of a startup. But as you grow into a more mature organization, you will need more specialists and a few all-rounders. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And this is, I'm in a Series A company, so this kind of is very, very relevant on that. Great. And so, I mean, you were mentioning about this thing where you seek for people who use the word impact, because that is what you're actually looking for. And there are people who, I talk to say impact, and they're very much willing to work in a high velocity environment and excited about it when we're talking. But when they actually get into the space, they're perhaps not that ready, which is also like, my point is, I understand that everybody does not work in the same way, and you have to adapt your work style to what suits the people. But like, how do you prepare people for such things, for them to be their own owners for their parts, even before they join, so that the expectations are kind of in check?
That's a very tough question to answer, and I'll tell you why. If I give you a straight up answer, I would be lying through my hat to just look smart. But as I said, I'm not the smartest person in this room, probably one of the dumber ones, right? But because this question doesn't have an answer. How do you judge someone and their way of working before you work with them? It's impossible. I can create these fake scenarios where I can give them tasks and projects to do before, this is standard operating procedure. Startups will give a project. Hey, I'm giving you something, you execute, you have 3 days to do this work, which usually takes 3 weeks, because you're just testing for time, you're testing for expertise, you're testing for attitude, right? And you want to see if this guy will deliver or not. I did the same thing when I was hiring for a head of partnership role. I gave everybody 7 days to I gave them a problem, and I gave them 7 days to come back with an answer. And some people came back with like 1 slide, 1-page document. Like, I'm like, this guy didn't even think through. Like, I'm not putting an effort only, right? So these are, again, very static inputs. Even those who might give a lot of thinking and, give them with a very good answer and, maybe lean in a lot during the interview process, once they come on board, you might find it's not really working out. And that's honestly the nature of arranged marriages and love marriages. Essentially, you're doing a fast track arranged marriage here with somebody, right? And you're trying to find everything that a 2-year live-in relationship will tell you about that person, which you can't afford. You're hiring on a dime. Like, one conversation with me, one project, and I have to decide whether you fit the bill or not. That's basically an arranged marriage. And unlike arranged marriages in India, in employment, you have very easy exit clauses. So people, what you have to figure out is, if it is really not working out, that's a conversation you and that person need to have on and off. So obviously you want to give them a benefit of doubt and see if the pace, because also it's become very clear to them, if they're not walking in step with the pace in which the organization is operating, they will feel left out in every group meeting, conversation, and they will feel like, oh, this is stifling. So either they will leave on their own, or you will have to create a path for them to leave. So there is no other way to do this. Sorry, I'm not giving a very elegant answer, but that's the honest truth. There is no foolproof way of doing this.
Yeah, and the arranged marriage example kind of is really helpful to think about it, I suppose.
I think also taking from that, one of the questions was, how do you deal with bad actors or people that are not performing well enough? How do you motivate them or like try to get them in line? And how do you make sure that they're not affecting the other team members and like lowering morale in general?
So there are like, I'll give you an example in the Twitter example as well. When I had zero attrition, it doesn't mean that I did not have people leave. I actually made a couple of people leave, right? Why? Because not everybody can operate at that level all the time. 2, and one thing I'll tell you, and this is a big learning for me, was when I joined the Twitter South Asia team, right? I did not fire a single person. The standard operating procedure is, a new manager will come. If the team was underperforming and everybody said this is a shitty team, you will fire most of them and you'll get a new team. Or either you bring the people who used to work earlier in an organization, or you'll just hire fresh, right? I didn't fire a single person. So now you tell me the same people who were doing negative 50% year-on-year business turned around and did 700% growth in 4 years. Where was the fault? Is it the people or the process or the context in which the team was operating? If I had come in September 2017, the answer would have been people. Like, dude, your people are not performing, right? So when you are looking at your team and you're seeing some people are not performing at the level in which others are, it is not necessarily that the person is not good. It is maybe the role in which they are operating, or the context in which they're operating, or the environment in which they're operating, or the people in which they're surrounded with are not helping them being optimal in their job. Or maybe the job itself is not right. You should give them some other role to do. That is my inherent bias. I don't believe people are inherently dumb and will not perform. I think people sometimes find themselves doing the wrong job in that organization, and you need to move them to some other role in the same team or another team. And that's a chance I would always take. If after that it is not happening, then I think, yes, this person is not going to perform irrespective in this organization, at least, no matter what role you give. And then you have to have that conversation about an exit path for them. And these are hard conversations to have. Nobody wants to have them, but you cannot escape it, because you can't have underperformers in your team. If you have an ambitious target of growth, no matter what function you're in, marketing, sales, HR, whatever, you have ambitious targets. You want to create ambition in the team. You want to have a team of overachievers. One bad apple can create a negative vibe in the team, and that brings the entire temperature of the team down. Instead of looking forward and being hungry and operating as founders of your own company, 10 people in that team all acting with a founder mentality. You have 10 people of the team with one person completely operating like working in a government job and just bringing everybody down, and then everybody more worried about their ass than looking forward to the, for the next day. And I think if that happens, and it always happens, one person is an idea, two people is a team, three people is politics, right? So essentially, every time you have more than three people, you have politics, because people lose context, and then people misunderstand, and then people will start, then whispers start happening, right? So you have to find who and where are those conversations happening and nip it in the bud as soon as you can. You cannot afford, especially if you're in a startup. The last thing I will ever tolerate in my life is in a startup, you have politics. If you really like politics, please go and join a large company. Those people have nothing to do except play politics, because the company is so large, it is that juggernaut is going to grow at that 8, 10, 12% on its own. It's just going to happen. That energy of the organization will just take it forward slowly and steadily. But if you're a startup and you have people playing politics, you have to get rid of them immediately. You cannot afford it. It's an existential thing for startups.
I think.
Sorry, I'm unmuting without permission. Am I allowed? I'm just started up with what Arvi just said. I'll just give a small introduction. I am one of those 10% people who's never been in a managerial position, and I'm a designer. I work with a startup, and I've had experience in. I've had 2-3 years of experience in startups, and I'm so motivated by what you just said. But I wanted to flip the question around. What if the manager is the bad apple, but you are so motivated to be a self-starter, and you find everybody else in the organization good leaders except for the one in your own team? And that's what makes you feel like it's sort of being a bottleneck to your career. What do I do to find a better way out?
I'll give you the very practical answer. Leave the organization.
Yes, I'm in the process.
The managerial answer would be look for another role, have a conversation with others. If they're feeling the same way, go have a talk to that manager's manager. But trust me, in a company, the minute you go skip level, you are creating politics. Then that skip level manager will do, you do not know what that person thinks about this person. If they are good friends, you are the one who's going to get shot in the face. So the easy way out, and honestly, I'm just giving you very standard, I'm very practical advice.
Thank you.
If it is against all odds and you think this is just not going to change, you have to look. If there is a way, and if you are able to see, if you've been in the organization long enough, so there is a point that I didn't make. And let me go back a bit. Okay. If I were to go back in my career, when I was in my 20s, right? The thing that I would encourage all of us to myself to do more than I have ever done is to network, both internally in my organization and externally. There are two reasons one needs to network. It is like compounding interest. Your relationships will give you dividends tomorrow. Two, to talk about technical language, it is human APIs. The more human APIs you have, the more network connections you have, the more you will start getting a sense of the environment in which you operate, and that will give you dividends. Now, coming back to your example of this manager, if you have been in the organization long enough to have formed various relationships, and if this one individual manager is the bad apple, right? If the relationships are there, you can navigate through those relationships to find a way out. Either get an honest conversation about that bad manager with an HR and have a few conversations. Like that has happened. Even at Twitter, I've seen people do that. Sometimes it backfires. I have seen it backfire to those people who went to HR and that manager went behind their back and got them. Again, these are real life examples that I've seen. In some cases, that manager got fired, right? So employment relations came into the picture and they actually took it up and there was an investigation and the manager got fired. But it is so case to case dependent. Nobody can give you a single straight answer. For me to say, leave this job and go and take one is a single straight answer, which is not right. For me to say, go coalesce with others who have the same feeling and go and report that manager is also not straight. Because every situation is different. Every organization is different. Your situation, personal situation could be different. You may not be in a position to take a risk and economically, for instance. So I'm not going to here pontificate and give you a general answer saying this is the only way to do it. But the only way to mitigate risks in life, because you will have in a long enough career, you will have good managers and bad managers. You will have bad people in your team and good people in your team. So assume that variability will happen across your career. So which means if it's going to happen, the only way for you to vouch against that incident, which is anyways going to happen, is to build that human network inside and outside. That's the only strength you can build for yourself.
So is there any tips of, I mean, since I'm also beginning, and is there any tips that I could take from you of how to be a better, how to better assess during my interview whether I would be able to work with the manager, because manager does that when they're interviewing you, right? So what do you think I could use?
Things that people don't do. When I interview people, I always finish my interviews, and that's a really, really good question. I think it's one of the smartest questions I've had in a while, in this week for sure, in all the meetings I've done, is I always leave the last 25 to 30% of the meeting time saying, okay, do you have any questions for me? And what I find most often, people will ask what they think are intelligent questions about the business and the role. They rarely ask questions about me, the team, my style of working, because they think they might offend me by asking me this question. And I'm like, that is actually not an offensive question to ask. If I'm asking you about your work and I'm going to drill you on every itemized thing you've done in your life, you are going to be spending time with me. You have the full right to ask me. Now, obviously, again, I said, people are all different. Nobody is the same, right? Some people might not like it that, oh, how did she's got a chip on her shoulder that she's asking me questions. But if that person has that chip on the shoulder, you're actually pretty well off not working with that person in the first place. But I think you have the full right to ask. And that's the confidence you should be having in yourself that, I should be asking this question as well. Like I told that Lewis in my team, I said, the confidence basically likes attract like, right? If you show confidence, people will come to you because they feel you're a very confident person. You know the subject matter. I want to talk to you, right? If you're a person who does not expose confidence, right, then people can assume things without context and take advantage of situations. So my advice is, in every situation, create a network effect of yourself. You know your subject matter more than the person who's interviewing for. Until that person is an ace designer, so then you have to say, okay, boss, I'm here to learn from you. Humbly subject yourself to their expertise and say, I'm here selfishly to learn from you. And so then use that opportunity to learn from them. But in most cases and all, I would say, if you can, have the conversation with the hiring manager saying, how do you go about with the team? If I were to ask, like I asked somebody interviewing me, and actually when I joined the startup, I asked the founder that if I were to call 5 people in your company right now, actually I said this to her. I said, Bianca, if I call 5 people in your company right now and ask them about you, 2 things good about you and 2 things bad, what would they tell me? So I did the reverse interview as well, because I want to know who I'm going to be sticking. I'm leaving Twitter and joining a startup. I'm staking more than people put money, which is seed investment. I'm putting my time, which is more expensive than money. So I want to know who's the person I'm aligning with. And so that's the kind of question I want to know, that if I were to pick up a phone and call your family right now, what would they tell me about you? So you should ask the same question, right? If I were just a dipstick, what would they say? First words out of the mouth. And that actually, there are many ways of asking this thing, right? Confrontational way or in a very nice way. And if you ask in a very nice, polite way, I think people will answer that question. Nobody's going to say, no, how dare you ask me that thing? If that person is being an asshole about it, I think it's better not to work with that person.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're already a little over time, but someone from Paint Lab's hand has been up for a while. So I'm going to let her ask the final question. And then
Thank you so much, dear. Thank you so much. I am Meenal. This is going lovely session. Thank you for the session. So I have a practical question. In my company, we've been trying to hire a sales person for a long time. And I thought the right approach would be to get someone with experience who comes with maybe a sales experience in startup, and also some databases and networking so that we can start easily and close a few sales, and that will be keeping the motivation level high for the person who joins also. Yep. But we have been able to do that because what we are getting as an answer or reply for not accepting the offer despite of a great job role profile, all of that, is that I would rather go to a more established company than joining a startup, because that gives me more perks and less work pressure, and maybe a more relaxed way of living. I think the great resignation phenomenon has displayed spoil sport here. So should we keep looking for hiring someone with experience, or should we look at training freshers and becoming specialist, but that will be a very long haul, and I'll have to personally go and, attend meetings and close sales. Don't know whether, that person will be able to get us some sales. Sorry for that long question, but this is a real practical problem.
I'll ask you a couple of questions because there is no straight answer to this. What is the stage of the startup?
Early stage startup. Proven MVP, product market fit is there.
You're at seed stage right now.
We haven't got any funding. Yes, we are bootstrapped.
Okay, bootstrap. And are you selling enterprise? You're selling B2C? What is it?
Currently, we are selling B2C. We are building the B2B or enterprise channel. We have had some organic sales. Now we see potential and we want to build that channel. And we're specifically hiring for that role.
And is your comp that you're offering competitive?
Yes, it is.
I'll be very straight up and honest. If you're looking for somebody from a large organization to join a bootstrapped company today, very difficult. Very, very difficult, right? Most of them are taking the easy way out because they don't want to work so hard. If somebody wants to join a bootstrap company, right, and you're looking for an experienced person, that person might want more than just a comp. They might say, I want something more than a comp. It has to be some kind of a level of a partnership of the founding team where I get more. Otherwise, why would I risk? Because, bootstrap company can not get the seed and it might flop. There's a higher chance of flopping than winning, right? And more startups fail than succeed. So for someone to take a risk in the career from a large organization would be very difficult to attract that talent, quality talent. Now, depending on the complexity of the product or the service that you're selling, I don't know what it is, right? Training a fresher or someone with experience, again, it all depends on what you're selling and to whom you're exactly selling. If it's consultative selling of large, complex tech software, you will need somebody who's been there, done that, and has the Rolodex, right? If yours is not a hardcore B2B software sale to, say, CTOs and CIOs, let's say if it's not that, then you might not need someone with that level of expertise and connections in the market. So again, it's very situation specific. I can't tell you what is the right way, but I will tell you in this market in which we are in today, hiring is the number one biggest challenge for anyone. Forget about startups, even for large organizations. There are more open headcounts than there are people applying for those roles, right? I'm looking for people around the world right now. And it's just a nightmare getting the right person because you don't want the wrong person in. Where you might be able to, I have seen of late headlines, I'm sitting in Singapore, a lot of good startups are laying off people given the crunch in the valuation. May be able to get some talent from those folks. Again, I'm not in the market in India, so to give you a very, but to be honest, if you're sitting in Bangalore or Delhi and Bombay or in Hyderabad, etc., and trying to attract tier A talent to a bootstrap company, very, very difficult in this environment because there's just so many choices today, right? That person would rather go to a series A and B, which is well funded, than do a bootstrap. If that person will come into a bootstrap and has oodles of experience, that person will want more than just a competitive pay package. Because that pay package is the same anywhere, right? I mean, you're going to give 40 lakh rupees, he or she can get 40 lakh any other place. So what is the delta that you're giving him or her for taking that risk? So you have to equate for the risk that you're giving. You obviously, and being bootstrapped, you can't compete with the larger pay packages that a larger company can give that person also. So obviously your pay package cannot be out of the world.
Thanks, Arvinder. We're going to unfortunately have to cut it short because we're already 7 minutes over time. But thank you so much, Arvinder, for doing this with us. I think it's been super insightful. The chat box has just been, people are just talking about how practical and insightful this session was. So thank you. Members, thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we have the Leap Affair happening in Bangalore. So I'm hoping to see some of you over there. And for the rest of you, I hope you'll have a great weekend. And I will see you at the next experience. Thank you and bye.
Yes, have a lovely weekend.
Thanks,
Bye.
Arvinder.